Thank you. Thank you. Namaste. I'm going to take you back to a rather famous moment in history. It was a cold winter evening in 1948. Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi was walking across a lawn to attend his daily evening multi-faith prayer meeting. It was a friendly crowd. And suddenly, one man stepped forward, first bowed to Gandhi in reverence, and then shot him at point-blank range. But the Mahatma, the great soul, had actually lost the will to live many months before the assassin caught up with him. On his last birthday, it was also his only birthday in free India, in October 47, he said, "It's for me a day of mourning because I have lived to see my entire life's work reduced to ashes." And that's because he had spent 50 years before that working for just two things. One was to prove that nonviolent politics was possible, and the other was the dream of a free and united India. But freedom came at great cost. India was partitioned. The most horrific communal violence erupted. An estimated, and this is a conservative estimate, 2 million people perished, and many more millions were displaced. My entire clan was part of that moment. We lived through and survived that Holocaust. I have vivid childhood memories of my parents talking about both the trauma of partition and the trauma of Gandhi's assassination. They say 1.5 million people showed up for Gandhi's funeral. It was a long procession. And my father was in that crowd. And it's from my father that I first learned about Gandhi's tenacity. That how even in this darkest hour, when he was heartbroken, when he himself considered that his experiment had failed, he never lost faith in nonviolence. He said, "I have failed, not the ideal." So what was this? Why did he have so much confidence that nonviolence is as old as the hills? And what can we learn from his experience that is, significant for how we live our day-to-day life today, how we act in politics? And I'll take you to a story from Margaret Mead, the cultural anthropologist. She was once asked, what is the oldest artifact of human civilization? She didn't point to any man-made, human-made object. She pointed to a 15,000-year-old human skeleton in which the femur had broken and then healed, and the person had gone on to live a longer life. This meant that at a time when our ancestors were pretty much wandering herds, people had started to stop for the one who fell. Somebody cared for that person so they could recover and live a longer life. Now, Gandhi knew this by instinct, but he also knew it from his very detailed observation of everyday life. And so the claim that life in its raw form is short, nasty, and brutish was a pernicious claim, according to Gandhi. And he said that any claim for being civilized that accepts this as a truth is doomed. To equate civilization with technology is the path to darkness. For what is civilization, not just what builds it, is our capacity for care, compassion, love, and above all, cooperation. Now, how did these values appear in Gandhi's own life? I'll give you an incident when he was just 24 years old. He was at that time, a failed lawyer. He was really struggling to make a living. And he's on a train in South Africa, and he's thrown off, literally, forcibly thrown off the train because a white passenger complains that a brown man cannot travel first class. And he said, "I have a ticket," but that was no good. Now, we would think today that this was a classic justification for a lifelong trauma. He could have grown in resentment. He could have hated white people all his life. But exactly the opposite happened. Instead, Gandhi realized, one, it's not personal. It was not about him. Two, the issue here was injustice and discrimination. And three, he resolved to fight it. But fight it without resentment or hatred for the perpetrator. And that inaugurated the journey which today we call nonviolent action in multifarious forms. Over the last 2.5 years, I've spoken to 109 people from 24 countries on this platform, Ahimsa Conversations. And there's a diversity of views, but I'll give you just the 2-3 things on which everybody agrees. One, Ahimsa is not absence of violence. Ahimsa is when we overcome our desire to harm people or our equally innate capacity to be aggressive. It's the energy that is released when we are able to engage with care and compassion, stand firm against injustice, but do so without trying to obliterate or even to hate the wrongdoer. And in its highest form, it's love in action. Now, all this seems very nice, but there's a catch, right? In everything, there's a catch. And for me, that complication was best illustrated by a woman I met at a nonviolence training workshop in New York. She said, I ain't showing up for a gunfight with a bat in my hand. And I realized that what she's saying actually is what Gandhi repeatedly said himself, that it is better to take to arms than to cower in cowardice or to be feeling defeated and helpless in the face of violence. And violence is a reality. So it is not surprising that a lot of people who show up for nonviolence training are struggling with precisely this. They don't want to be cowards. They do want to be brave. And yet they don't want to be brave in the way that we are commonly taught that, the people who carry guns and knives are brave. On the contrary, true bravery is to engage to take a stand without violence. So ahimsa is both natural and it is hard work. It is natural because we now have ample evidence from multiple disciplines of both natural and social sciences, which is showing us, and this is research-based, it's not anecdotal, it's showing us that it is much harder to train people to kill. Militaries across the world report that it takes a lot of effort to break down people's inhibition to kill, but it takes almost no effort to train people for nonviolent action. At any rate, it is much, much easier for people to learn and adopt. Why? Because I think it's an inward process of discovery. The very act of seeking to learn nonviolent action enhances well-being. It's a process of self-discovery, and that fills your outward view of the world with wonder. Now, how does all this connect to what we are here today to deal with? I mean, what we are trying to strive for, that we want to be effective change makers, and yet we also want to do it in ways that enhance our own well-being and that of the larger systems in which we engage. So here I have just one suggestion, that maybe we need to constantly reflect on what is the dharma of our karma. Now, to roughly translate, it means what is the civilizational frame in which we are anchoring our actions. If our frame is to accept that we are fundamentally violent, that yes, life in its natural form is short, nasty, and brutish, that we are descended from the killer ape, and so therefore, our capacity for violence is a dynamic, progressive thing, then I'm afraid we are going to risk individual depression and collective despair. But if we are willing to accept that the non-violence impulse is equal or stronger than our violent impulse, and both are human impulses, then a very broad and wide open horizon, opens up for us, in which the possibilities are truly infinite. I'll close with another story. This one is also from a journey on a bus, a very famous journey. You've all heard of it. Rosa Parks on that bus in Montgomery, USA, that, when she defied that attempt to evict her on the grounds of racism, she wasn't doing it randomly. It was a result of training. She was part of a movement. But above all, it was her conviction that conflict may be inevitable. Violence is not. And so I'll close by reminding all of us of the famous words that Hannah Arendt, to whom I pay great tribute, the political philosopher Hannah Arendt, so clearly put it in a nutshell. She said, "It is never power that flows from the barrel of a gun. It's only instant obedience." And that is why disobedience is so important. Gandhi's killer succeeded in creating an immediate impact. Okay, his victim fell dead on the spot. But that is not what is shaping history. What is shaping the future of our species is that Gandhi's defiant disobedience inspires generation after generation. I truly think Einstein was not exaggerating, when he said that for generations to come, this act, what was going to be remembered, what is being remembered, is this defiant disobedience. So power with each other, not over each other, is our goal. And disobedience, nonviolent disobedience, is the path, is the energy that lights up our pathways. Thank you so much. Namaste.